lethal fighting forces ever assembled. Yet, in his first interview with an American reporter in more than a decade, Saddam Hussein remains defiant. Defiant even in the face of an impending war that seems certain to end his rule and quite possibly his life. We met him on Monday in Iraq's oldest and largest presidential palace at a time when the UN arms inspectors have accused him of having prohibited missiles. And when President Bush has said time has run out, that the only thing Saddam can do to prevent war is to disarm immediately. Anything short of that, President Bush says, is a game. At this moment, the Chief Weapons Inspector, Hans Blix, is preparing what could be his final report to the UN. In a matter of weeks, with or without international support, the American and British forces could begin an all-out assault on Baghdad. And their primary target will be this man, Saddam Hussein. Mr. President, do you expect to be attacked by an American-led invasion?
We hope that the attack will not take place, but we are bracing ourselves to meet such an attack, to face it. The officials in America keep talking about attacking Iraq, and it's normal that the people prepare themselves for such a possibility. At the same time, they are praying to Allah to stop the Americans from going through with it and to spare the Iraqis from the harm that those on the bandwagon of evil want to inflict upon them.
Are you afraid of being killed or captured?
Whatever Allah decides, we are believers. We believe in what He decides. There is no value for any life without faith. When we were young, we decided to place ourselves to the service of our people. We did not ask the question whether we were going to live or die. It's morally unacceptable to ask such a question. Nothing is going to change the will of God. The believer still believes that what God decides is acceptable. But we reminded President Hussein that he has more earthly concerns. More than 100 missiles that UN inspectors say have a longer range than permitted, threatening Iraq's neighbors and capable of attacking American troops in Kuwait. Do you intend to destroy the Asamud missiles that the United Nations prohibits? Will you destroy those missiles? We have committed ourselves to Resolution 1441. It is on this basis that we have conducted ourselves, and it is on this basis that we will continue to behave. As you know, we are allowed to produce land-to-land rockets with a range of up to 150 kilometers, and we are committed to that. I want to make sure that I understand, Mr. President. So you do not intend to destroy these missiles? Which missiles are you talking about? We do not have missiles that go beyond the prescribed ranges by the UN. I mean the missiles that Hans Blix says that he wants a commitment from you that they will be destroyed. No violation has been made by Iraq to anything decided by the United Nations. If the intention is to rewrite those resolutions, then we will be entering a new framework, a framework in which the United States will be made to forsake its own position and take a new road towards harming Iraq. In our interview, Saddam Hussein gave no indication he will capitulate to an ultimatum from Chief Weapons Inspector Blix to begin destroying the missiles by this weekend. Indeed, he hinted he will not. Saddam also rejected Bush administration allegations that besides the missile delivery system, he still has weapons of mass destruction. I think America and the world also knows that Iraq no longer has the weapons. And I believe the mobilization that's been done was in fact done partly to cover the huge lie that was being waged against Iraq about chemical, biological, and nuclear weapons. That is why, when you talk about such missiles, these missiles have been destroyed. There are no missiles that are contrary to the prescription of the United Nations in Iraq. They are no longer there.
The Bush administration says President Hussein is just trying to fool the world one more time about his missiles and his weapons of mass destruction. And he faces a new UN resolution accusing him of failing to prove he has disarmed, a resolution which, if passed, would in effect authorize war. Will the new proposed United Nations resolution, the one that's just out this week, will this make any difference at all in your position?
The basic position, there is no change. We have not pursued any weapons of mass destruction. So, what do they want to issue new resolutions about now?
So basically no change in your position.
The basic stand of our position is clear. We do not compromise our independence, or our dignity, or our freedom. At the same time, we will continue to commit ourselves to what has been decided by the United Nations. If the new resolutions infringe upon our dignity, then our position towards such a resolution will be in line with our previous positions.
Mr. President, have you been offered asylum anywhere? And would you, under any circumstances, consider going into exile to save your people death and destruction?
أنا أفهم أنه دافع السيد رادر هو الإثارة في
I can understand the motive behind your question. This is a very American style, and it may not be liked by some. But I can understand.
مع ذلك أجاوبك.
However, I will answer your question.
Thank you.
أنا ولدت في العراق.
I was born here in Iraq, and I was born as a genuine believer. I am proud to have been born fearing God, and I have taught my children the value of history and the extreme importance of Iman, of our heritage, that we must maintain the honor of nationalism and pan-Arabism. We do not change our position. Our position is basic. We have been born in Iraq. This is part of a glorious nation, a great Arab nation, and we have lived here. That is why, talking about asylum, whoever decides to forsake his nation is not true to the principles. We will die here in Iraq. We will die in this country, and we will maintain our honor, the honor that is required of our people. I believe that whoever offers Saddam asylum in his own country is in fact a person without morals, because he will be directing an insult to the Iraqi people. The Iraqi people who have chosen Saddam Hussein unanimously to continue to lead the people of Iraq.
The Iraqi president told us that the first Bush administration threatened it would bomb Iraq back to a pre-industrial age, and then attacked his country with thousands of warplanes and helicopters and missiles.
دمرت كليات، دمرت جسور، ودمرت قصور.
They destroyed bridges, colleges, buildings, factories. They destroyed houses, palaces. They killed people and elderly, but they did not push Iraq back into the pre-industrial age.
Saddam Hussein said his country stood up to the challenge from one Bush administration in 1991, and if forced to, will stand up to this new Bush administration as well.
It's now time for him to fully disarm.
نحن نأمل ونتمنى أن لا تحصل حرب.
We hope that war will not take place. But if war is forced upon us, then Iraq will continue to be here. This country, with a history of over 8,000 years, this country, the cradle of the first civilizations of humanity, will not finish just like that even though a huge power may want it to be like that. Nobody should accept that Iraq will finish in such a way.
Americans are very much concerned about anyone's connections to Osama bin Laden. Do you have you had any connections to Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden?
Is this the basis of the anxiety in the minds of U.S. officials? Or is it the basis of anxiety in the minds of the people of the United States?
Mr. President, I believe I can report accurately that it's a major concern in the minds of the people of the United States.
We have never had any relationship with Mr. Osama bin Laden, and Iraq has never had any relationship with Al-Qaeda. And I think that Mr. bin Laden himself has recently, in one of his speeches, given such an answer, that we have no relation with him.
Do you or do you not agree in principle with the attack of 9/11?
Let me tell you absolutely clearly, we believe in humanity. We believe in accordance with what Allah, the God Almighty, has taught us, in the same way that God has taught humanity as a whole, that there must be a law governing humanity and governing relations in humanity, that there should not be an aggressor while others are silent about the aggression. There should not be a killer while those who watch and applaud the killing.
Not so long ago, you were clearly hailed by Arabs, from Palestinians to Jordanians, throughout the Arab world, as the, quote, Arab Avenger. Are you still relevant on the Arab street, or has Osama bin Laden made you, with other Arabs, irrelevant? Hope you can understand the question. Thank you.
This is not our goal. What we want is not a personal issue. What we want is what Allah wants and what our nation wants. We want our nation to be happy, not to be spoken of as heroes. The most basic thing to be said about Saddam is that he is a true son of his nation, and to say he did his best for his people and his nation.
And he does or does not agree that Osama bin Laden is now the champion of the Arab streets?
How do you see it? Mr. Rather is an intelligent person. I believe that he wants to get to the truth and not merely provoke or to try to get someone to say something that might be held against him. The most essential thing is to stop the aggression against our nation and the Iraqi people. You see how the Palestinians are killed on their land, and their homes are demolished, and their properties are destroyed, and no one is trying to take away their handcuffs to free them. And if the Arabs consider Osama bin Laden a hero, we are not jealous of him. Jealousy is for women, and men are not supposed to be jealous of one another.
At one point during our interview, Saddam got up from his chair and said it was time for him to pray. He left the room, and we thought that might be the last we heard or saw of him. But he returned about 10 minutes later, seemed refreshed, and answered questions about what kind of war he expects and if he'll set his oil fields on fire. Those answers and his proposal for a sort of duel, a TV debate with George Bush, in a moment. Third car, driven around the city east, west, north, and south again before we reached our final destination, the Republican Palace. I recognized the palace from just last month. We were reporting from here when the UN inspectors made a surprise visit. But you can't see much from outside the gates, and for security, you're not allowed to take pictures. The only way to see it is from space. This is Baghdad as seen from a satellite. A huge, sprawling city, bigger than Los Angeles. Tucked hard along the Tigris River is the old palace, the Republican Palace, apparently one of Saddam's favorites, built by the British just after World War I, when they took over what is now Iraq from the Turks. We were driven through the main gates, through several checkpoints, and with armed guards all around, we were finally taken into the palace itself, a place heavily bombed during the first Gulf War and now meticulously restored. About 2.5 hours after we left our hotel, just a few miles away, we were greeted by Saddam. He seemed thinner when we saw him 12 years ago. He seemed healthy, though a bit stiff, apparently from back problems. And in our interview, he made a proposal directly to President Bush.
What is the most important thing you want the American people to understand at this important juncture of history?
أولاً أن تنقل إليهم بأن شعب العراق ليس عدوهم.
First, convey to them that the people of Iraq are not the enemy of the American people.
وإذا أراد الشعب الأمريكي أن يعرف المزيد عن
If the American people would like to know the facts as they are, through a direct dialogue, then I am ready to conduct a debate with the President of the United States, President Bush, on television.
أقيم حوار مع السيد
I will say whatever I have to say about American policy.
الأمريكية على التلفزيون.
He will have the opportunity to say whatever he has to say about the policy of Iraq.
من ملاحظات على السياسة الأمريكية.
And this will be in front of the world, on television, in a direct, uncensored, honest manner. In front of, as I said, everyone. And then they will judge what is true and what is false.
This is new. You are suggesting, you are saying that you are willing, you are urging a debate with President Bush on television?
نعم هكذا.
Yes, that is my proposal.
الشعب الأمريكي مثل ما نعرف.
On films, we see that the Americans are courageous.
حتى إنه في
When challenged to a duel, they will not back down, just as the Arabs would not.
وهذه فرصة له إذا كان.
This will be an opportunity for him to convince the world if he is committed to war.
للحرب.
If he is convinced of his own position, this will be an opportunity for him to convince the world that he is right in making such a decision.
وفرصة لنا.
It could also be an opportunity for us to tell the world our own side of the story and why we want to live in peace and security.
وأعتقد من حق الشعب الأمريكي.
I believe that it is the right of the American people, the Iraqi people, and the world that we show our evidence clearly so that they can see for themselves.
فلماذا نحتجب عن الشعب لا نظهر أمامه.
So why should we hide from the people? Why shouldn't we show them both perspectives? We, as presidents, President of the United States and President of Iraq.
هذا الذي أدعو إليه.
This is what I am calling for. We will either make peace, and this is what we hope for, and spare our people harm, or whoever decides anything other than peace will have to convince his own people with the facts.
هذه هي خلاصة.
This is the gist of my proposal, my idea.
This is not a joke.
لا لا.
No, no.
أدعو إلى هذا لأن الحرب.
I call for this because war itself is not a joke.
Mr. President, where would this debate take place that you imagine?
الرئيس الأمريكي في أمريكا.
The American president in America
صدام حسين رئيس العراق في العراق.
and Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq in Iraq.
الطريقة الفنية المعروفة من على عبر.
And then the debate can be conducted through satellite.
So a satellite television debate.
نعم.
Yes.
وإذا كان السيد بوش.
And if Mr. Bush has another proposal, then we are prepared to listen.
والأساس.
What is important is the idea.
Would you be prepared to come to the United Nations for this debate?
الأساس هو أن.
The most important thing is that our debate be heard in a normal and accurate way.
طبيعي وصحيح. أنا لا أقصد أن ألقي خطاب.
And by this, I do not mean that I go and I make a speech at the United Nations and then that Mr. Bush will make his speech at the United Nations.
ليس هذا المقصود.
That is not what I mean.
وإنما نقعد مثل ما قعدنا اليوم.
What I mean is that we sit as we are sitting, you and I, now. I will address questions to him and he will address questions to me.
أنا أشرح موقف العراق.
He will explain why he wants to go to war.
هو يشرح لماذا.
I will explain why we are insistent on peace and we want to maintain peace.
شبث بالسلام وندافع.
And we defend our honor and our sovereignty and our rights.
وأن يسمعنا الشعبين الأمريكي
So that the American people, the Iraqi people, and the other peoples of the world will hear us.
من غير تزويق ومن غير.
Without tricks, without editing, without prepared speeches, people want to hear live and direct dialogue.
Well, this surprises me, but I want to make sure I understand.
أن تنقل في التلفزيون الأمريكي كاملة.
The debate could be broadcast on American and Iraqi television in its entirety, and it should be broadcast live.
والبث مباشر.
A live international debate via satellite.
نعم تمام.
Yes, of course.
How would this work? Who would moderate this debate?
نعم السيد راذر.
You, Mr. Rather.
With respect, Mr. President, I have plenty of other problems. I got enough problems already, but
As soon as the White House heard of Saddam Hussein's proposal for a debate, it was immediately rejected. A spokesman called it not serious. During our interview, everything Saddam Hussein told us was being relayed with the help of his two translators sitting at the same table. It turns out that Saddam was not just speaking, but listening carefully to what they were saying. At one point, after President Hussein mentioned President Bush Sr., one of his translators called him Bush instead of Mr. Bush. Saddam Hussein interrupted him in mid-sentence.
And how Bush, the father...
أنا ما قلت بوش. قلت السيد بوش.
I didn't say Bush. I said Mr. Bush.
أنا تاريخية.
I am being historically accurate and showing him respect.
I understand his point. He wanted to call him Mr. Bush.
كنت لا أقول السيد بوش عندما.
I used not to, and this is a funny anecdote, address him as Mr. Bush when he was in power. But as soon as he left office, I referred to him as Mr. Bush. We believe that we should respect the humanity even of our enemy. That's why I refer to him as Mr. Bush.
Mr. President, I hope you will take this question in the spirit in which it's asked. First of all, I regret that I do not speak Arabic. Do you speak any English at all?
سيادة الرئيس أرجو هذه كوفي.
I have coffee.
الأمريكان يحبون القهوة.
Americans like coffee.
That's true, and this American likes coffee.
وأنا آسف لأنه لا أتقن اللغة الإنجليزية.
I am sorry. I do not speak English fluently,
أنا أفهم بقدر ما أستطيع.
but I can understand to some extent.
Well, would you speak some English for me? Anything you choose.
Our language is Arabic.
هي العربية.
A footnote to what you just heard when Saddam Hussein corrected his interpreter, asking him to say Mr. Bush. A reminder that after the first President Bush left office, Saddam Hussein tried to have him assassinated, and today one of Saddam's own newspapers refers to the second President Bush as the son of the snake. In a moment, we ask Saddam about his plans for war. Be a war with the United States, but he certainly has been planning for one. In this part of our interview, the Iraqi leader shared some of his thoughts about war with the U.S. Those thoughts are shaped, some might even say warped, by Saddam's view of the situation today and of recent history. Saddam sees the world in his own terms and takes the same approach to interviews with television reporters. Saddam will allow only cameramen from Iraqi TV to record his interviews. He says this is for security reasons. We could not bring our own camera crews in, or even a tape recorder. The Iraqis provided cameras for our interview. They provided the interpreters to translate Saddam's remarks into English, and they provided us the tape of the interview hours after it was over. CBS translators here in New York carefully compared the official Iraqi translation with their own independent interpretation and found their translation of Saddam's remarks to be accurate. Those remarks include a surprising assessment of the outcome of the 1991 Gulf War and an equally surprising renunciation of the tactics that left Kuwait's oil fields in flames at the end of that war.
If there is an invasion, will you set fire to the oil fields? Will you blow the dams for your reservoirs of water to resist the invasion?
Iraq does not burn its own wealth, and it does not destroy its own dams. We hope that this question is not going to be used by those who intend to attack us to cover their backs while they themselves destroy Iraq's dams and oil wells. Iraq will not destroy its oil or dams, but will use them and protect them for the benefit of the Iraqis.
Mr. President, Vice President Richard Cheney of the United States says that if and when an American-led army comes into Iraq, it will be greeted with music. It will be treated as an army of liberation. If Americans are not to believe that, why should they not believe that?
If the Iraqi army or any other army were to cross the Atlantic and occupy America, is it going to be received by the American people with music? I am categorically certain that no Iraqi will welcome any American when he is an occupier. But all the Iraqis will welcome any American who comes as a friend. That is why, now that you are here, you are being welcomed, even though you come from a country threatening to destroy Iraq. Haven't you seen the kind of welcome you've received by officials and ordinary citizens? You can roam about in the town, but if an American soldier is here as an occupier, he won't be received in this way. So as long as you are not a soldier, you are a guest, and a guest is always treated with respect. Any American, if they want to know the real position of the Iraqi people, they must ask themselves a question. In 1995, the Iraqi people elected Saddam Hussein president of Iraq, and in 2002, they re-elected him. And the percentage of the voting was, respectively, 99.6% and 100% in those two elections.
100%?
100%. This, I know, may sound strange to you, but even if you take out whatever portion you want to take out of that, then the ratio would remain high in favor of re-electing Saddam Hussein. Now, what does that mean? It means that the Iraqis have decided to take a patriotic stand under the circumstance of war and the blockade, in order to say to the foreign powers that are threatening Iraq, it is we, the people of Iraq, who decide our way, not you telling us what to do.
You mentioned 1990 and 91, the Gulf War. You fought the father, George Bush I. He and the forces he led prevailed on the battlefield. Now you face the son, who has an even greater, even more modern, even more lethal military force aimed directly at your throat and heart. Why would you think that you could prevail this time on the battlefield? Or do you?
You know that in both cases, we did not cross the Atlantic to commit aggression against the United States, neither by land or sea or air. The officials in America are the ones who are talking about the intention of attacking Iraq. Isn't it the responsible thing, the moral thing, and the most basic thing to do to warn the aggressor that if they attack us, we will not surrender? If we ask the question to any honest American, including you, Mr. Rather, Let us suppose that during any time in the future, if another power comes to America, do you do nothing?
أنا أجاوب.
I will answer.
أنا أقول للأمريكان
I will tell the Americans that if such a thing happens to you one day, do not surrender. Stand and defend your country and your dignity.
ومثل ما تعرفون نحن لا.
And, as you know, we didn't commit aggression against America. America is the one who is daily killing our children, our women. As I'm talking to you, there are American planes in the south and the north dropping their bombs on the citizens and on their property. This happens daily.
عندما يسود قانون
If there is a law in the world that says the stronger ones get their way, it means surrender to the law of the jungle. And we do not want to surrender to the law of the jungle. It is our duty to defend our country, so we will not surrender. Not to America, not to anybody else.
مع تصحيح تاريخي
Just a quick historical correction
يهمكم ويهم
that might
الشعب
interest you and the American people.
في عام 91 لم يهزم العراق.
In 1991, Iraq was not defeated. But our army withdrew from Kuwait by our own decision. It's true, they left Kuwait under bombing, but when they were back inside Iraq, they were not defeated, and neither were the Iraqi people.
Mr. President, respectfully, a lot of Americans are going to hear that and say, what is this man talking about? Because all of those Iraqi tanks coming out of Kuwait with the turrets knocked out indicated a beaten army on the battlefield. The point is, I'm asking you to explain what you mean that you were not defeated in the 1990-91 war, because I can report to you with accuracy that overwhelmingly the American people believe that that was a resounding defeat for you and for Iraq.
دعني أجيبك على هذا السؤال.
Let me answer this.
أنتم تعرفون أهداف
You know the goals of Bush the father, and you know he attacked us repeatedly after that. So why did he repeat his attack if we had been defeated?
عندما يحصل صراع عسكري
When there is military conflict, there is attack and there is retreat. And when we saw that Bush the father, the president, had mobilized 28 armies against us, when we saw that the whole world was in fact collaborating against us, we realized that we had to withdraw from Kuwait.
في أعظم خسارة للوحدات.
We did not lose more than 10% of our equipment in all of the battles. That was the worst loss suffered by any of our units.
إذا نحن خسرنا معركة.
So, we lost a battle, but we were not defeated.
بماذا يهدد العراق أمريكا؟
In what sense does Iraq threaten America? The Iraqi people are not the enemies of the American people.
سيد راذر رجل مطلع.
Mr. Rather, you are a well-informed man, and you know the battle is not over until the guns are quiet, and when the national will is bent to what the aggressor wants.
لا يكفي.
It's not enough to have superiority in planes and missiles. In the final analysis, the guns will tell the tale of a courageous people defending themselves against the occupiers. This is a decision made by the people of Iraq. They will continue to commit themselves to the role that will make them respect themselves as well as others.
Mr. President, you say that knowing that poised on your border is a tremendous armada ready to deliver destruction and awe.
نعم أنا أفهم.
Yes, I understand, I hear, and I see. But the final truth will be decided by Allah on Iraqi soil,
وفي بغداد.
in Baghdad.
بمعنى لا أعني مصير الأمريكي.
I'm not talking about the fate of Americans in America, but the fate of Iraqis in Iraq, and the fate of anybody who attacks Iraq.
Mr. President, I appreciate your remembering that we met in 1990 and I interviewed you in this very building. Given the sober moment and the danger at hand, what are the chances this is the last time you and I will see each other?
الأساس هو أن الله سبحانه
Only Allah decides the fate of man. But the Almighty also says, man should prepare what is necessary here on earth. Then, I can see that in the future, We will meet another time, no matter what happens or what takes place.
ونأمل أن يعيش
And I hope that the Iraqi people and the American people will live in peace and have a relationship that expresses their national interests without one side harming the other.
يصدر من أحد على أحد.